Today we're looking at my top 10 pro tips for PUBG on Xbox and PS4. I've played a lot of PUBG in my time, to the point where I've racked up over 500 solo wins. And the tips I'm sharing with you today are what I feel are the most important tips to consider if you want to win more games and get more kills in PUBG on Xbox and PS4. So let's get started. In no particular order, tip number 1 is the effective use of frags. And to be honest, I could probably make a whole video on how to effectively use frags. So there's kinda more than one tip in this tip, but bear with me. So whenever you're in a one-on-one fight, when should you use frags? And the answer is as soon as possible. When both you and your opponent have some sort of cover, you should almost automatically default to equipping a frag. A good player in PUBG will use his cover well and peek left and right. A great player will quickly come to the conclusion that frags are very overpowered, and if used correctly will give you the upper hand in most gunfights. For a frag to be effective, it's very important to cook it so your opponent has less time to flee, but almost as importantly, make sure that you're cooking it outside of your opponent's line of sight. A good player in PUBG will see the animation of equipping a grenade or a throwable and change position accordingly to make sure they avoid any damage. The frag push is also a very effective strategy that you'll see me using very often in PUBG. This is especially used when your opponents are hiding behind trees, and involves throwing a frag to one side of the tree and then flanking to the other side in anticipation of your opponent having to push that way. So in a nutshell, frags are way too good in PUBG at the moment, so get used to using them and use them often. Tip number 2 is to make sure that you're stationary when you're firing. Being stationary when shooting drastically increases your hit registration and accuracy. Even slightly strafing while shooting will result in fewer bullets connecting with your opponents. The only times I'll move while shooting is if I'm in a very close quarter combat situation, when I'm aim firing or hip firing, and also when I'm aware of an immediate third party opponent who's lining me up. And even then, if I'm being third partied, I tend to creep forwards only while I'm shooting, towards my enemy, because I find that any side to side strafing movement significantly reduces your accuracy. Tip number 3, the flank. This is honestly one of my most used tactics in PUBG. When you're flanking an opponent who's behind cover, keep the position that you expect your opponent to peek from in the center of your screen. This way, the second your enemy emerges from cover to fire at you, you're already one step ahead and have them lined up in your sights. In this situation, I actually prefer to be the player running in the open than the player hiding behind cover, as the player behind cover has to peek and then line you up, and then fire. Whereas the flanking player already has the lining up part done and only needs to stop and fire. Additionally to this point, stopping on a dime like this is very difficult to react to as an opposing player, and by the time they do react, they're generally either getting aim punched or dead. Tip number 4, effective sniping. Similarly to the principle of flanking, when you're sniping, you can catch your opponent off guard by lining them up in the center of your screen before you stop to aim down sights. When you're in a sniper battle, your enemy will often be stationary, so this is the perfect opportunity to sneakily line them up and send them back to the lobby wondering what hit them. Also, sniping is partly a mental battle, so psych your opponents out by pretending to flee from the battle and see if that causes them to peek or become complacent. Tip number 5, use of first-person perspective. Playing in the Oceania region, I'm pretty restricted to only playing third-person perspective, but there are definitely some huge advantages to switching into first-person perspective in certain situations. More recently, I've instantly been swapping into FPP when coming into very close quarter combat fights, and also when entering buildings. As a result, my win rate in these situations has improved dramatically. The reason for this is that the aim function is much easier to control in FPP, as rather than estimating your bullet's line of fire or bullet trajectory, you can actually see it firsthand. Take a look at the examples in the video if that doesn't really make sense to you. Tip number 6, looting care packages. This one should go without saying, but always loot armor before weapons when you arrive at a care package. Too many times I've killed players who were stationary with level 1 helmets while decking out their newly acquired Groza before they actually protect their noggins. Stay safe out there, friends. Tip number 7, looting tips. This is especially important during early game, where efficient looting can be the difference between living and dying. Use your invent to equip certain items. Helmets, vests, bags, and throwables can be equipped by pressing the A button. This is faster than slowing down to look at the floor and loot, and also by keeping your sights up, you're in a better position to snap to surprise attacks from your enemies. Also, if you press A on a throwable, it will equip that throwable straight into your pocket, so you don't actually have to select it and it's ready to use. Tip number 8, learn to drop quickly. Getting to the ground first obviously has its benefits, and currently the best way to drop is to exit the plane from roughly 800 meters. From there you want to travel between 195 and 205 miles per hour, while leaving enough altitude wiggle room that you can descend down to a speed of greater than 225 miles per hour. This will allow you to consistently get to the floor faster than your opponents, unless they've also watched this video. Tip number 9, snapping to gunfire. During a game of PUBG, you should develop a working memory of your surroundings. So this is a really good example here, where I hear a few grenades going off across the water. Every time I hear the grenade, even if I'm not already looking in that direction, I snap to that direction so that I can pinpoint where the sounds are coming from. The benefits of this is that I can make estimated predictions of where these players are likely to move. And in this example, I'm pretty confident that they're going to have to cross the bridge or swim across the water, so I can be ready and waiting for when they're in a vulnerable position. Tip number 10, and this is seriously one of the most important tips that I'm going to give you guys today. Make sure that you're enjoying playing PUBG. Care less about your stats and your kills, and more about your strategy. Learn from your mistakes rather than beating yourself up about them and expecting to have done better. Understand that there's 99 other players out there who are trying to achieve the same result that you are, so it's okay to get unlucky, to die to a player who you thought you should have beaten, and to have slumps where you go 5-6 games without a kill. That's the beauty of PUBG. If this game was easy and you won every single game, it would get boring really quickly. But it isn't uncommon for me to have a few average games in a row, and sometimes I get frustrated and decide to, take a break and come back later rather than raging and ultimately not having fun. Because at the end of the day, that's why we're playing this, right? So if you find yourself obsessing over stats and kills, get rid of the apps, stop looking at your season stats, and just focus on having a good time, and you'll play better. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you found it useful and can put some of these strategies into play. If you enjoyed the video, do consider subscribing to the channel. But anyway, take it easy. I'll see you guys next time.